This time in the Prop Master, well, we're going to do basically the same stuff as we did last time. But bigger and more awesome. That's right, and by awesome I mean we're going to end up with something that is starting to look like Boba Fett, and that's pretty exciting, finally. But we still have a lot to do, so let's get to work. So now it's time to turn our attention to the flak vest. And of course that means it's time to go back to our horribly made and distorted, deformed body form that I made years ago, and also my flag vest, which is horribly warped and damaged. So basically just ignore all of this stuff that I've done to this. This is just, look at this as just evidence of all the different things that I've tried to do to get along or get around to the best way to go about doing this. If you'll recall, this is all the result of me having a bunch of these lift the dot snaps that I thought would be really cool, kind of military-like, to put these on, only to realize that they're way too tall. You know, they take up way too much space. They would hold the armor way out from it, so I had to then attach them from the back side and have it poke through, and regular snaps are going to be way better for this. Unfortunately, I don't have a spare flak vest to work with, so I'm going to have to work with this. So I'm going to go ahead and use the lift the dot snaps that I have. I think it's all going to still work for me. You, however, are going to want to go with regular snaps. When I originally did this, I just tried to sort of draw with pencil and divide everything up, try to get a center line and line things up that way. It did not work. I was not happy with the way everything fit. And so I've kind of come up with a different way. And of course, not only that, but I realized that I can't get rid of these pencil lines, but we'll paint over them when we start actually distressing the suit. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is take some of your scrap foam. This is just the 1/4 inch foam, and you want to cut a couple of strips this size. You know, a long strip, one long strip, or a couple of, maybe 6-inch strips, and you want to cut it out as 3/8 of an inch, which is about 9.5 millimeters, or close enough to 1 centimeter as you can get thickness of that. So you want just cut off a strip of that, and then you're also going to want to cut out a strip that is about 5 millimeters, or in this case it's 3/16 of an inch thickness. And you can kind of remember that back from, if you remember this, from like the very first video when we started working on the suit. Those are the sizes for these spaces in here. The space in between here is the 3/16, and the space between here and here is the 3/8 of an inch. I'm just going to show you this. I've also taken some duct tape. Actually, this is Gorilla Tape, which is probably overkill. Probably way too much. Duct tape is going to be fine for this. I've just ripped off a couple of 3.5 inch strips, and then about 20 little strips that are somewhere in the neighborhood of an inch long. You just go to your form or your model, and I have my back piece. Just going to lay that in position. And then I've got my collarbone piece. And I just want to tape them together using the larger pieces of tape. Now in this case, I've got the front panel is the Sintra, and my back panel is the EVA foam, so we've got it going 50-50. But it doesn't really matter. If you're using the EVA foam, it's going to be easier to, they'll conform a little easier because they're more flexible, but we can make it work. So stick these together. And there's a good chance they're not going to want to just line up perfectly. So you'll probably have to, maybe do some pulling to kind of force them to line up. Okay, so I've got those on there. I'm going to flip this around. You can... There's a good chance you'll probably need to take some tape and kind of force the back to lay in the position it's supposed to lay in. I'm just going to take a little bit, don't get too crazy with it. And the main thing, I'm just trying to get it pulled forward. I'm already going to have to untape part of it so it can move. Now I've seen a lot of the photographs of the original prop, and in several of them this piece is like up there about to choke him. That's not what we're going for. You kind of want this to line up at the top of the flak vest. So next I'm just going to take one of my pieces of the 3/8 of an inch, or roughly a centimeter. I'm just going to use that for a spacer. I'm going to lay it here and I'm going to tape it directly on here. Do the same thing on the other side. Obviously skipping the middle part so that you don't have to worry about that bend. Make sure it's on there nice and flat, because I want to transfer that angle onto the rest of the pieces. Next, I'm going to take these two pieces here, and here's where you're going to notice that things are not going to line up perfectly, and we'll just have to work with that as we go along. Probably best to go ahead and take a couple of pieces of our 3/16 and go ahead and put those here. The reason why I was doing this is I want to kind of hold them together with the right spacing when I put them up here, because I want them to, hit the corners on each side and also to line up at the center point. But I wanted to make sure they have the right gap between themselves when I do that. And even though these curves are not really lining up, you know, the curve on this piece and this piece doesn't line up, that spacer really helps out to get the spacing correct. Okay, so now we can go ahead and grab the ab piece. Now what I found here was that the 3/8 inch piece was not quite enough space, actually. When you do that, they end up touching in the corners, so we're gonna have to add a little bit more space here for that. So I just combined an 1/8 and a 1/16 piece together. Now I can go ahead and drop these in. Trying to make sure that this little point here lines up. And make sure that it lines up with this little gap here. And then you'll be able to see that, you know, this is also even through here. If you wanted to, you could probably add a little bit more space. I was trying to avoid getting too much of a gap through here. There's enough of a gap on the sides here where it does move, and I think that's probably going to be good enough. And now I can look at how this lines up with the flak vest itself. Looks like it's a little bit high on this side and a little low on this side, so that can help me to get my get everything adjusted. Unfortunately, there's just no way to guarantee that the seams on the flight jacket or the flak jacket are going to be perfectly symmetrical. So that's the reason why I didn't want to try to just line things up with the flak jacket itself. That's also why it would help to have a much better body form than I have. Hopefully you either have a professional body form or you followed the directions in my previous videos about making a body form and have one that's a lot better than this. The main thing I'm looking for now is just to make sure that this comes down to where you can see a little bit of the flak vest up here at the top, and that this is level across the bottom. Or at the very least symmetrical. I can live with not being level if it's short here and gets longer toward the edges, as long as it's symmetrical. Now when you get to the back, the most important thing is to make sure that your vents here in the back armor are lining up with the vents that are in your flak vest. And they do look good here. I can definitely stick my finger through. With all that lining up, And it seems good on the back. It still wants to pull down further here. The main thing I'm checking here is I want to see if I can find a spot where it's in the right place and that all of my previously attached snaps are covered up by the armor, and it looks like it's going to work right about here. Okay, now that I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and pull the armor off. But I'm going to leave it, oops. But I'm going to leave it taped together. Now that you have your armor, you can go ahead and take the back and the front pieces apart. Okay, so I've taken the front and the back pieces apart, and so here's my front piece here. And I want to go ahead and attach my snaps the same way we did on the cod piece and the knee pads and that kind of stuff. And I would go ahead and put, there's no precise placement here, but I would put one in each of the top corners, not right at the corner, but you know, in just a little bit. I would put one at the two lower corners. And I'd probably put one right in the middle in this center section here. So there you have 7 snaps just for the collarbone piece. Then from there, I would probably just go ahead and do maybe 4 each. For the these pieces, and I'll go ahead and put one more down in this area here. You could, if you wanted to, go ahead and do 5 and put one in this corner here, but I'm going to go ahead and just do 4, and then we'll see how it goes. If we need to add another one, we can go ahead and do that. And then you want to do a minimum of 4 in the ab area as well, maybe 1, 2, 3, and 4. Go ahead and do those. Go ahead and put on all of the snaps for the front. I can't show that to you at this point because unfortunately, since I'm having to work with the snaps that I've already put on to the flak vest, I'm actually going to be kind of working opposite of what I'm telling you to do, whereas I'll be working with the snaps attached to the flak vest and trying to transfer those onto my armor. And I'm telling you to start out with the armor and then transfer those marks onto the flak vest. So go ahead and put your snaps on here. For the back, you'll also want to put in a couple of snaps on each side of the shoulder area. You're going to want to put a couple of snaps on the sides. Along there, and also on this side as well. Sort of in those corners. From there, if you want, you can add another snap here in the middle. And that's probably all you really need. If you want to, you can go ahead and add snaps for these two lower corners on the inside as well. So if you want to go all out, you're talking, what, 11 snaps, I guess? So go ahead and put the snaps on the back as well. And once you're done with that, we can go ahead and move forward. I will say this, if you're working with the EVA foam for your armor, you're going to want to put the snaps closer out toward the edge so that it can help to make the foam conform. If you're working with the Sintra, I'd suggest moving it out a little bit from the edge. That way you're less likely to see the snaps themselves. It'll still hold it in position, but since it's stiff, I'm not saying put it like 2 inches away from the edge, but don't put it right up against the edge, just because if you do that, you'll be constantly seeing the snap whenever you move around, because the Sintra is rigid. It's going to be trying to pull away all the time. And I'd say maybe these aren't bad, so maybe an inch away from the edge. So let's go ahead and make the marks so you'll know where to place the snaps on here. And like we did before, I'm just going to go ahead and use some paint. Any paint that you've got will work. Just don't use a paint pen because it just dries too fast to transfer the mark. Now, in this case, I'm going by the seams that are in the flak vest. I laid all this up here, and I know that this is the position it's going to be in. It was a little bit more complicated because, once again, I have to make sure that I'm covering up the snaps that are already in here. You won't have that problem, but you want to basically just hold this up until it's in the right position. There's a good chance that that will work with your seams. Excuse me. It only gets worse. There's a good chance that everything will line up with your seams, but if they don't panic. You do want to, before you pick your position, go ahead and put the back piece in place and make sure that everything will line up properly, because that's going to be, one of your main concerns. If not, it's not a big deal to, extend the ends of the back piece. I'll show you how to do that after we go ahead and do this. But if you end up with a gap and you need another ½ inch on here, it's not that difficult to just take a ½ inch piece and glue it onto here. It can also be, my body form is so badly warped that it's kind of hard to use. But as you can see, that this doesn't line up with this seam at all. But part of that is just because the body form, this armor fits my body a lot better than it fits my body form. And when you actually push this into the same contour, you can see that the seam does come in and will line up. The important thing is to make sure that it's in the right position along the very top. This needs to be somewhere in the vicinity of the top of your vest itself, and it needs to be flat and even across the bottom. just barely above the top of the flat jacket. And then you can go ahead and mark. In fact, I've gone ahead and put in a snap here, and I put in a snap here just so that I can make it a lot easier when I'm trying to film this to show it to you. But once you get it lined up, then you can go ahead and mark the center snap on this piece of your armor, and go ahead and mark the jacket in the same way that I'm about to show you for the rest of it. So I'm just going to take a little bit of paint, and once again, you'll be marking the snaps that are on your armor, whereas I'm going to mark the snap that is on the vest itself. And make sure that it's in position, and then just push it down to where they make contact. Pull it up. And at least for this first piece, it's going to be a lot better if you kind of go one or two at a time. Just because it's going to be really difficult to get all of those in position at one time. And also, as you see, I'm using a little different tape this time. You're a little bit better off using duct tape on this. It will not hold as well as Gorilla Tape does, but it also will not leave as much residue. The Gorilla Tape holds really well, but it leaves a lot of residue that you'll have to clean up after, a little bit later on. So as you can see, it has made a little mark here. In your case, it will have made a mark on here so that you'll know what position to make. And then go ahead and put the snap on just the way we did in the overalls, or the coveralls, I should say. You go ahead and use that same technique to put the snap in here. Oddly enough, I've found that it's a little bit, you have to be a little bit more careful with this. When you're doing it, it's really easy to punch holes in the wrong places, or punch it through too much of the fabric. So just make sure that when you put the snap in, make sure that you're just going through this one layer of fabric and not the back. If you look on my back, you'll see that I did in fact cut a hole through the back and into, I think when I was doing this hole right here, just because it gets all twisted around and hard to know what fabric you're going through. So just kind of rambling on here, but just make sure that you have your snap under just this piece when you're punching it through. Do it the exact same way you did on the coveralls, and when I've attached this snap on, we'll go ahead and do some more. So basically this is the part of the video that seems to happen each time where I've managed to lose the audio. So I'm just going to do a voiceover here and hopefully tell you what's going on. Basically I just came back after putting the snap on, and I'm going to see how everything fits. And it looks like everything's fitting pretty well, and I can be pretty happy with the way that looks. Everything seems pretty even. Just going to check and see if that is still going to fit in place once the fabric's pushed into the armor itself. And it all looks pretty good to me. So I guess it's time to go ahead and mark the next pieces of the next positions of the snaps. I will say that I've really found that you need to go one snap at a time on this. If you go any more than two, you're really going to end up having problems where you're dragging the material out of position. So unfortunately, it's going to take a bit longer, but it really does help a lot if you go mark one snap and put it in place. And then put it back on and mark the second snap and, put a new snap on. So now I'm just putting it back in position so I can mark the position of the other snaps. So I'm just painting the snap, making a bit of a mess, I think, probably. Trying to get it completely in the right position and then pressing it down. And so here's the mark that it made, and I can go ahead and put the next. I guess I'm commenting on the fact that I got green paint all over everything, but it's not really a problem. So anyway, let's go ahead and put the next snap on, and then we'll take a look at it. Okay, so I've got the snaps on. I went ahead and did this side as well, just because there's no point in me showing you all this stuff since it's a different process than you're actually going to be doing anyway, so I kind of sped things up a little bit. Now here's what I just found out. Let me snap this in place. This side's actually fine. This actually all feels good. It's when I get over to this side that I have problems. I can easily push this in and that snaps into place and that brings this in line. But if you'll notice, this corner is like been pulled way up in here, and if you feel, this is like really tight. This all fits up inside here nice. This is like a bowstring almost here, and when I pull that up to fit, it pops this snap. And I played around with it a little bit, and what it looks like needs to happen is basically I need to move these snaps. Let me pull this off. I just need to move these snaps further out to the side to move this whole piece in this way. So once again, you won't have this problem if your body form is the correct shape and actually, fits your body. So if I push this fabric over to where it fits in there nicely, now you can see that it's in line across the top and this corner is still good. And this fabric all fits in here nice. And the only difference is the snaps are, I can kind of push this in a little bit. It's probably not going to show up though because I've already got the material down. The only difference is that it's hitting right about here instead of there. So basically these two snaps need to move over about, I don't know, 3/16 of an inch maybe to the outside. So when you're marking your position, make sure that you that the material fits three-dimensionally. It fits up against the armor. You make sure it fits snug up against the armor all the way around and not just the end pieces like I did over here. So I'll make that change. And I'll have to see if I can't rip these off. Once again, you won't have as big of a problem with that because you're going to be using a proper body form, and you have put the snaps on here, and you're going to be, you know, basically moving these snaps into where they go instead of these. But when you're doing it, make sure that you take into account all of the way the fabric fits everywhere, not just on the ends. So when you're marking that, make sure you get your hand inside there and make sure it fills the space properly all the way across. I'm hoping you can see this. You can tell whenever I'm having trouble because I start talking monotone and become extremely explainy. It really just means that I'm having trouble. And I've been worrying about this one particular fit for this whole project because it's really the most important part. So when you're marking it, make sure that the fabric fills that whole area up. And I'll go ahead and move these snaps and then we can get on with it. Also, you'll notice that once I got my general position in, I took the rest of this off of this one piece, the rest of the armor off of this one piece, because it's just be way too difficult to try to do all this fitting with the other pieces hanging here. So I'll move these over to here and we'll get back on the move. Okay, we're back now that I've gone ahead and fixed the position of, in fact, I pretty much fixed the position of all of these. Once again, I'm going to reiterate, you probably won't have this problem that I'm having, simply because you are working with hopefully a better body form than I am, and also, and probably more importantly, you're not having to deal with all of these studs that are sticking up, and with the reinforcement that I had to put in with them. This doesn't flex very well, and it makes it really hard to get everything to fit in here properly when you're trying to mark everything. But as you can see on here, I've moved everything several times, but I finally got it in the right position. Whereas you're going to have a much easier time. One thing that you do need to think about and be very careful when you're finding your position is that as hard as it is to move these things that have been put on with barge cement, it's going to be even more difficult to move snaps that you've put in through your fabric. So take the time to make sure that everything lines up good on the top and bottom before you start marking your pieces, your location for your snaps. You know, measure twice and cut once, so to say. So just make sure that everything's lined up good before you start making your marks. Then you won't have the problem that I've been having. But now that I have all those in position, let's go ahead and finish up this top piece, finally. And what that incurs on this top piece is just the two snaps that are left for down this area and in this area here. And they should be reasonably well anchored with all the other snaps that I'm going to go ahead and do both of them. Okay, and I've got my locations here and here, And once again, I'm going to go ahead and take off the rest of this. It's going to be a lot easier to work with this. So voiceover Mark II. So I've got my snaps are back, and I'm not sure what I'm talking about there, but I think I'm talking about the fact that, you know, my snap locations are not exactly where I originally wanted them to be, but that has more to do with the fact that I've got to line up with these little studs that are on the vest itself. So let's go ahead and see if this is going to fit. And guess what? It looks pretty good, but you really won't know for sure until you put the rest of it on. The rest of the, or at least hang the rest of the armor pieces on, and kind of look at it as an overall piece as it looks straight on the vest. So I mean, even if it is not lining up perfectly with your seams or your mark, the important thing is that when everything's hanging off of it, that it looks like it's in the right position. On the bottom, it's real noticeable if you've got, like, you know, 1.5 inches on one side and 1/4 inch on the other. That's going to make it look like it's crooked. So the overall look of it is definitely more important than where it lines up at the top or bottom, but, you know, just make it look good. I think I'm talking about here is the fact that I've gotten finally a little bit of good luck with the kind of snaps I used in the past, and that is that I really don't have to use paint to mark it. The little, you almost want to come like little barbs or whatever that come up, the little balls that pop up, I can just push those into the back of the Sintra and it'll leave a mark. But you'll be still using the paint to mark the fabric and not the other way around. So that's what I'm doing right here, is I'm just pushing them down and marking it on the armor itself. And it looks like I'm doing it on this side too, but remember what I said before, you want to pretty much just make it 1, maybe 2 marks at a time, especially when you're going over this much of the fabric at once. You definitely don't want to do all 4 of those snaps. And you can see there, you can see the little marks that it makes. Let's go ahead and put those snaps on, and hopefully we'll have my voice back when we get back. Okay, I'm back, and here's these two in position. You might be wondering what's up with the shapes of these, of the cloth that I'm using to hold these on. And basically what it comes down to is I'm trying to reuse these from the prototype, and so basically I've just managed to, the ones that I was able to remove from the prototype, I kind of got whichever ones work for me here. May not be the same position on the prototype, and so they're just kind of strange shapes, and sometimes I've had to cut out, you know, areas so that they'll fit on here. There's no rhyme or reason really as to why they're such strange shapes. It's just kind of an evolution. You don't have to worry about that. So I can go ahead and pop this in position. Now the real reason why I wanted to put the snaps on here first is I'm afraid that if I tried to take measurements all the way across, it would be really easy to kind of shove the material around and get false readings. So now I know that the flak vest is attached to this piece. So now that when I take my measurements or marks for this piece, I haven't, you know, I haven't moved this around behind it. I think when it comes to the layout here, what I would like to do would be to add another spacer between these two so that this is really the same amount of space between these two as there is between you know, this top piece and the breast pieces. So this is like 3/16, or maybe this is 3/16, and this is 3/8. I think I would like to double this space, so this was also 3/8. I think that would give us a little bit more room here. I think this is going to work fine, but I'd like to have just a little bit more room here. That would also give us more room for this piece, which is kind of rubbing right now. But I can't do it because I've got a snap that's right up against this edge as it is. And if I move this over even that, you know, 3/16 of an inch, I just can't make that snap work. But you might want to go ahead and make the space in between these pieces the same as between the collar piece and the breast pieces. So use that same 3/8 inch spacing here. I think that'll open this up enough that this won't be rubbing the whole time. I may have to go in here and, you know, once I get these all in positions, if it's just going to be a problem, I may have to come in here and remove some material, which you can always do that as well, but I think it would be just easier to add that little bit of spacing here between these two. I just can't do it because I've got issues with these pre-existing snaps. Just more problems I'm having that hopefully you won't have. But now that that is in position, let's go ahead and take our marks here. Okay. Okay, you can kind of see how close I'm getting here with these marks here. I've got two of them now, which gives me a bit of an issue. I have to figure out which one of those is the right one. I think I'll have to go ahead and go the paint method. Okay, so we have our snaps in position on this piece. Let's go ahead and see how it looks. I've got this piece on here already. All right, you know what? I'm happy with that. The main thing I was concerned with is making sure that these lined up pretty well here. Don't have like a big gap, you know, with one of these being way up high or something like that. The gap here is nice as well. And when this goes in place, I think that's going to work out pretty well, actually. I don't think I'll even have to sand anything, but we won't know for sure until I get everything mounted. Okay, so now that those are in place, I can go ahead and get my marks in. This is going to be tough again because I have a similar situation here. Because of how bad the mannequin is, I've got a huge gap here. I don't know if you can see that or not, but I've got a very large gap here, which I need to somehow, I think that'll work. And I can go ahead and mark this. Do the same thing on this side. It's not as deformed on this side. I'm afraid I can't do it without hiding the view. You know what? I think I'll do the paint method on this one. Got a mark there, looks pretty good. I know it's a little bit tedious you know, doing this 1 or 2 snaps at a time, but believe me, in the end, it's going to be a lot more accurate and you'll be a lot happier that way. And since you won't be dealing with glue, it'll be going a lot faster for you. We've got a mark here as well. Go ahead and highlight that. And we can go ahead and put these snaps on. Got these snaps in place now, so let's see how they look. See if they actually fit right. Now there's one more snap that I may or may not go ahead and do. It's in this corner here. That's looking pretty good. I think it's ready to go ahead. I'm gonna, instead of worrying about this one right now, I probably will go back and get that because I don't like how this lifts up so easily, this corner. So I probably will go ahead and put a snap there. But I'm gonna go ahead and hold this in position. Get it where I want it. And get that marked. Okay, got a good mark there and there. You know, once again, I'd like to have gotten it there, but you know, I have to work with what I've got. I'm not going to worry about these two right now. I'm just going to get these two, and then I can mark these once it's locked in position. So once again, I'll be right back. You know the drill. You know what? It's actually starting to look like Boba Fett now, which you know, puts me in a good mood. Somehow it ended up a lot lower, much lower than I thought. Well, I mean, it's probably where it's supposed to be. Maybe if I do, that's what it needs. Once I pull that up, it's gonna be good. So, okay. I just need to make sure that I pull this down and make that even across the bottom before I do these snaps here. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and get these 2 snaps and then do these 2 snaps here. And we'll have all this armor except for the heart, so to say. So let's get on with it. Make sure the bottom's even. I'm going to continue to do this one and then the next one. I'll do this one and then I'll probably do this one, and this one all at the same time. Here. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and get marks for this one, and this one, and go ahead and do those all at the same time. I do have my marks though, so I'll go ahead and take care of that and put this one back on and we'll be good. Okay, we finally have all of the snaps on all the pieces, so let's see how it finally looks. This just shows the great thing about snaps is the fact that I don't have to worry about the position anymore. It's always going to be in the right place. let's hope it's always in the right place and not always in the wrong place. You know what? I'm happy with that. That looks good. Still need to put this in place, but I think I'm going to do that at the very end. That'll be the very last piece that I put on. Sort of bring it to life. Okay, so what have we learned here? I think what we've learned is that we definitely chose a standard regular snap is going to be far superior than these lift the dot snaps. You want to put the snaps on the armor first and then transfer the locations onto the flak jacket. Try to make sure that your measurements are, you know, as close as you can possibly get them, all the way down to the bottom, and then just work, you know, 1 or 2 snaps at a time, especially when you're going from one piece across to another. Get your markings on one and then lock it in place. Otherwise, it's just too easy to shift the fabric back and forth when you're trying to get your other marks. So take your time, do 1 snap at a time if necessary. After you put the snaps on the material, if you decide that it's off, go ahead and move it, but don't move the snap on the material. Go ahead and try to move the snap that's been glued onto your armor. So the thing about that is you want to put the snaps on your armor at a time when you're going to have time to put the snaps on the material. Don't put your snaps on the armor and then wait 2 days to try to put them on the flak vest, because it's going to be a lot easier to move the glued down snaps if they haven't cured all the way yet. Because I can tell you, once they're cured all the way, they are not easy to pry up. But they will be a lot easier to move than it will be to, you know, punch a new hole in the material. So once you put the snaps into the flak vest, they're pretty much going to stay in that position. So try to get the locations as good as you can before you put them into the flak vest, but once you do, you're going to want to move the snaps on the armor instead of the ones in the flak vest. Clear as mud. Okay, now we can actually get to a little bit more comfortable part, and that is we can go ahead and start working on the back. And this will be, at least, you know, the way you'll be doing it, and it's not a completely different technique. But you guessed it, you'll have to wait for the next video for that. And I know this looks a little bit rough, but trust me, by the end, it's going to look amazing. As always, if you have any questions or comments, just post them below and I'll do my very best to answer them. Hey, if you liked this video or found it helpful, go ahead and give it a thumbs up, and of course subscribe so you can catch all the rest of the videos, or you could even click that little bell so you'll know as soon as the next videos are posted. So until next time, thanks.